There are moments in astrology that quietly pass by, and then there are moments that seem to arrive with the unmistakable feeling that life is about to divide into a before and an after. Today is one of those moments. I want you to stay with me, because what is unfolding on July 1st deserves your full attention. An exact square is forming between Jupiter and Chiron, and while that description may sound like another routine astrological event, I believe this particular alignment carries a level of intensity that sets it apart from nearly everything else we have witnessed this year. The reason is hidden in a detail that many people overlook, yet once you recognize it, the entire picture changes. Both Jupiter and Chiron are meeting while standing at 0 degrees of their new signs. Jupiter crossed into Leo only 2 days ago. Chiron entered Taurus less than 2 weeks ago. Neither has had the opportunity to establish balance within this unfamiliar landscape. Both are standing at the threshold of completely new territory. When they lock into an exact square from that exact beginning point, the result feels less like ordinary tension and more like the opening of an energetic passage where healing becomes unavoidable. This is not simply about facing old wounds. This is about encountering them before your usual emotional defenses have a chance to take over. As I spent more time examining this configuration, one realization continued to stand out above everything else. 3 zodiac signs are especially positioned to experience this transformation in the deepest possible way. If you belong to one of those signs, the emotional pressure, uncertainty, or internal resistance you have been carrying recently is not meaningless. It is not evidence that something is going wrong. It is the preparation phase before a profound shift begins. Later, I will explain exactly how this alignment is expected to unfold for each of those 3 signs, because the differences are remarkable. Before we reach that point, though, it is essential to understand why this particular square behaves so differently from others. Without understanding the mechanics behind it, recent events in your own emotional life may continue to feel confusing. Once you understand what is happening beneath the surface, many experiences that seemed disconnected may suddenly begin fitting together in ways you never expected. One of the greatest misconceptions about astrology is the belief that every degree within a zodiac sign carries the same energetic quality. It simply does not work that way. Imagine a planet positioned at the middle of a sign, perhaps around 15 degrees. By then, it has adapted. It understands the language of that sign. Its expression becomes more refined because it has already learned through experience. 0 degrees represents something entirely different. It is the very first moment of arrival. It is untouched potential. It has not yet been shaped by repetition, familiarity, or emotional habit. There are no established patterns supporting it. There are no learned responses waiting in the background. Everything exists in its purest and least filtered state. That purity creates tremendous power, but it also creates instability because nothing has settled yet. Picture yourself stepping into a place you have never visited before. Every direction is unfamiliar. Every decision feels larger because there is no previous experience telling you what comes next. Excitement and uncertainty exist together. Hope and vulnerability become inseparable. That is exactly the energetic condition both Jupiter and Chiron are sharing right now. Jupiter entered Leo on June 29th. Chiron entered Taurus on June 19th. Both are still adjusting to entirely new environments. Neither has built emotional momentum. Neither has developed the stability that naturally comes with time. Now imagine those 2 freshly arrived forces pressing against each other through an exact square. The result cannot be compared to a square involving planets that have already become comfortable within their signs. Everything feels more immediate because nothing has hardened into habit yet. That is why I see this moment as an energetic portal rather than simply another challenging transit. Whenever energy is this fresh, the old emotional scripts lose much of their influence. the familiar explanations you have repeated for years, the protective walls you built after painful experiences, the beliefs convincing you that certain dreams remain out of reach. All of those patterns suddenly find themselves standing on unfamiliar ground. They cannot operate with the same authority because the landscape itself has changed. For perhaps the first time in a very long while, you are being offered an authentic opportunity to answer life differently. Instead of repeating automatic reactions, you can choose a response that belongs to the person you are becoming rather than the person your past created. That possibility begins today. The doorway is opening now, not someday in the distant future. The invitation exists in this very moment. Now let us look more closely at the two forces creating this extraordinary tension, because their interaction explains why so many people are feeling both inspired and unsettled at exactly the same time. On one side stands Jupiter traveling through Leo. Jupiter naturally symbolizes expansion, wisdom, confidence, opportunity, and the desire to grow beyond previous limitations. As it moves through Leo, those qualities become intensely personal. This placement encourages authentic self-expression, courageous creativity, heartfelt leadership, and the willingness to stop hiding behind fear. It awakens the part of you that longs to be recognized for who you truly are, rather than for the version of yourself that feels safest. It urges you to stop shrinking your gifts simply to remain comfortable. It is almost as though the universe places a spotlight directly in front of you, hands you the opportunity to speak, create, lead, or inspire, and quietly asks whether you are finally willing to let your real voice be heard. That invitation can feel exhilarating, but it can also feel overwhelming because being fully seen requires a level of honesty that many people spend years avoiding. Perhaps that explains the strange mixture of excitement and nervousness you've been carrying lately. Maybe there is a creative dream refusing to leave your mind. Maybe you have begun sensing that your current life no longer reflects the size of your potential. Maybe an inner voice keeps reminding you that settling for less is becoming more uncomfortable than taking the risk to grow. If those feelings have become impossible to ignore, you are not imagining them. They are reflecting the expanding influence of Jupiter in Leo, gently but persistently encouraging you toward a larger version of yourself, even while another part of you still hesitates, uncertain whether it is truly safe to step forward. And that inner conflict is exactly where the deeper story of this alignment is only beginning to reveal itself. Now, this is where the story reaches a level that many people never expect, because the force meeting Jupiter across this exact square is not another planet focused on opportunity. It is Chiron in Taurus, and Chiron always asks a much more intimate question. It points toward the place where old pain continues to echo beneath the surface, the part of your life that has carried invisible scars for far longer than you may consciously realize. Yet within that very same place also lives the possibility for extraordinary healing. Chiron never exposes a wound simply to make you suffer. It reveals it because transformation cannot begin until something hidden is finally seen. As Chiron begins its journey through Taurus, those themes become unmistakably tangible. The focus shifts toward your physical body, your financial world, your sense of safety, your relationship with stability, and the quiet fear that often remains unspoken even when everything appears fine from the outside. It is the fear that somehow you are falling behind, the fear that you are missing something everyone else seems to possess, the fear that what you have built could disappear without warning, leaving you exposed. Many people never say those thoughts aloud, yet they silently influence countless decisions every day. Now imagine these two powerful forces speaking to you at exactly the same moment. Jupiter in Leo continues urging you toward expansion. It encourages visibility, courage, creative expression, and the willingness to step beyond familiar limits. It keeps inviting you toward the larger version of your future. Meanwhile, Chiron in Taurus quietly raises entirely different questions. What if your financial reality cannot support the dream? What if your physical strength is not enough? What if you finally allow yourself to be seen and discover that you lack the resources to sustain what you started? What if confidence alone cannot protect you? That internal dialogue is the living expression of this square. If recent weeks have left you feeling stretched between overwhelming excitement and equally powerful hesitation, you are not imagining that contradiction. One part of you wants to move forward with everything you have. Another part keeps scanning for reasons to remain where life feels predictable. Both voices are active because this alignment is activating them simultaneously. The emotional conflict feels so convincing precisely because each side believes it is protecting you in its own way. One is fighting for your future. The other believes it is preserving your survival. That battle is unfolding within countless people right now, and recognizing it may be the first step toward understanding why your emotions have felt unusually intense. Yet this story extends even beyond your personal experience, because another planetary force is participating in the background, making this entire alignment significantly more powerful than it would otherwise be. Pluto is currently positioned in the early degrees of Aquarius. From there it forms a direct opposition to Jupiter while also creating a square with Chiron. Together, these three planetary relationships form what astrologers recognize as a T-square, placing Chiron at the apex where the greatest concentration of pressure collects. This is not simply symbolic tension. It represents an energetic pattern that amplifies everything already taking place between Jupiter and Chiron. Suddenly, the emotional discomfort many people are experiencing cannot be explained only through individual circumstances. The concerns arising around financial security, personal stability, and the reliability of the systems supporting everyday life belong to a much larger collective process. Many people can feel it without fully understanding why. Something about the structures that once appeared dependable no longer inspires the same confidence. Long-standing definitions of security are being questioned. Traditional ideas about value continue shifting. Familiar economic assumptions are beginning to lose the certainty they once carried. Even if you never consciously think about those changes, your nervous system often recognizes them long before your mind does. That is one reason this period may feel unusually exhausting. You are responding not only to your own story, but also to an environment that is changing beneath everyone's feet. During my own reflection on this alignment, one realization continued returning again and again because it completely changed how I interpreted everything happening. The instability itself is not separate from the healing. It is part of the healing. At first, that idea almost seems impossible to accept because most of us naturally associate healing with comfort, clarity, and relief. Yet many of life's deepest transformations begin by revealing that the foundation we trusted was never truly capable of supporting us. What feels like disruption may actually be the process of removing dependence on structures that could never provide lasting security. This transit appears to be encouraging exactly that kind of rebuilding. Instead of searching outside yourself for proof that you matter, it asks you to discover value that cannot be taken away by changing circumstances. Instead of measuring your worth according to income, productivity, appearance, or external approval, it invites you to recognize that your value exists before any achievement is added to your life. That lesson reaches directly into the heart of what this energetic portal represents. Real stability cannot come solely from accumulating resources, while the world itself continues changing. It must eventually arise from an inner certainty that remains intact regardless of external conditions. I believe that is one of the most profound invitations carried by July 1st. As powerful as this alignment is for everyone, its influence becomes especially concentrated for three zodiac signs, whose charts receive this energy in an especially direct way. For them, this is not simply another passing transit that briefly colors the emotional atmosphere before disappearing. The energy moves straight into the center of their identity, asking for change that cannot easily be postponed. If you belong to one of these signs, many experiences that have recently seemed confusing may suddenly begin making sense. The first sign is Taurus. And for Taurus, this moment carries exceptional significance because Chiron is now traveling through your sign itself. This is no distant influence operating somewhere in the background. It reaches into your personal journey with remarkable precision. I also want to acknowledge something honestly, because your path has already demanded extraordinary resilience over the past several years. Since 2018, Uranus has been moving through Taurus, and that transit has rarely allowed life to remain predictable for very long. It has repeatedly challenged the very areas where Taurus usually seeks consistency. Financial circumstances may have shifted unexpectedly. Your sense of stability may have been tested again and again. Daily routines that once felt dependable may have changed in ways you never anticipated. Comfort zones that appeared permanent gradually dissolved until many no longer existed in the same form. Just as Uranus now approaches the end of its passage through your sign, another chapter quietly begins. Chiron enters Taurus, and then on July 1st, the exact square from Jupiter arrives, almost like a powerful announcement, marking the beginning of this entirely new phase. The area being illuminated now reaches into your physical existence and your material reality. It asks you to examine your relationship with your body, your finances, and perhaps most importantly, a belief that may have lived beneath your awareness for years without ever fully revealing itself. It is the deeply rooted belief that your value depends upon what you accomplish, what you own, or what you are capable of producing. And recognizing that belief may become the very first doorway through which this remarkable transformation begins to unfold. For many of you, this period may feel like standing in front of a mirror that refuses to soften the truth. Suddenly, you notice every moment you dismissed your own needs, every talent you quietly minimized, every situation you accepted, even though it slowly drained your peace of mind. The awareness can feel overwhelming because it shines a light on places you may have avoided for years. If that realization has been uncomfortable, do not assume something has gone wrong. The discomfort itself serves a purpose. It is revealing what can no longer remain hidden. There is an important difference between pain that keeps you trapped and pain that points you toward freedom. What Chiron is awakening through this transit belongs to the second kind. It is not appearing to destroy your confidence. It is appearing to redirect it toward a healthier foundation. The lesson unfolding for Taurus is not simply about healing financial fears or improving physical well-being. It reaches much deeper than that. It challenges the lifelong habit of measuring your value according to what you accomplish, how much you produce, or how much security you manage to accumulate. Somewhere beneath the surface, you may have unconsciously accepted the belief that love, respect, and significance must constantly be earned. Yet this alignment quietly asks an entirely different question. What if your worth existed long before you proved anything to anyone? What if nothing external ever possessed the authority to define your value in the first place? Deep inside, there is a part of you that has always suspected this truth, even if life repeatedly convinced you otherwise. July 1st opens a doorway where that inner knowing can finally become something you live instead of something you occasionally hope might be true. The pressure coming from Jupiter may initially feel uncomfortable because it refuses to let you remain inside familiar patterns. Taurus often possesses extraordinary endurance, sometimes so much endurance that you continue carrying burdens long after they should have been set down. You become accustomed to solving every problem alone because depending on others can feel risky or even uncomfortable. Yet this square gently exposes that pattern as another form of limitation rather than strength. Allowing support into your life does not diminish your resilience. In many cases, it demonstrates a deeper kind of courage because it requires trust instead of control. as you begin giving greater attention to your physical well-being, listening to your body's signals instead of ignoring them, creating space for genuine rest, reconnecting with nature, embracing movement that calms rather than exhausts you, and learning how to regulate your nervous system with compassion instead of pressure. An extraordinary change begins unfolding from within. The external world may not transform overnight, yet your experience of it gradually does. Survival slowly gives way to stability, and stability eventually creates room for abundance. That abundance does not appear because circumstances suddenly become perfect. It appears because your relationship with yourself has fundamentally changed, allowing you to experience life from an entirely different emotional foundation. Now let us turn toward Leo, because another remarkable chapter of this alignment is unfolding there. Jupiter entered your sign only 2 days ago, and whether you have consciously recognized it or not, many Leos have already begun sensing its arrival. There is a growing momentum inside you that refuses to remain hidden. New, creative ideas emerge more frequently. Your desire to express yourself becomes stronger. Opportunities that once seemed intimidating begin looking surprisingly possible. Something within you keeps insisting that the time has come to stop standing in the background and finally occupy the space that has always belonged to you. It can almost feel as though life itself has shifted a spotlight directly toward your path, quietly inviting you to step into greater visibility. Yet the exact square to Chiron, positioned in your 10th house of career and public reputation, introduces another emotional layer that cannot be ignored. Every dream of expansion seems to awaken an equally powerful fear. Questions begin appearing almost immediately. What if you are not prepared enough? What if your experience falls short? What if people discover flaws you have worked so hard to hide? What if stepping into greater visibility exposes weaknesses that have remained invisible until now? If you have recently found yourself caught between overwhelming excitement and equally overwhelming hesitation, this transit explains why. Chiron reaches directly into old insecurities surrounding professional recognition, public judgment, achievement, and the fear of not measuring up. Under this pressure, it becomes incredibly tempting to compensate by projecting confidence you do not genuinely feel. You may find yourself believing that appearing fearless is the safest strategy. On the surface, that approach seems logical, yet this alignment points toward a completely different source of strength. Its greatest gift emerges when you release the exhausting effort of maintaining an image and instead allow others to encounter the person behind the performance. Genuine vulnerability often feels far more frightening than polished confidence because it cannot hide behind perfection. Yet authenticity possesses a magnetic quality that performance alone can never reproduce. Think about the individuals who have influenced you most deeply throughout your own life. Rarely are they remembered because they appeared flawless. More often, they are unforgettable because they allowed others to witness their humanity while continuing to move forward with courage. They acknowledged uncertainty without allowing uncertainty to stop them. That honesty became their greatest source of influence. This is precisely the leadership Jupiter in Leo now encourages you to embody. When your energy is no longer consumed by protecting an image, it becomes available for meaningful creation. Your focus shifts away from earning approval and toward expressing genuine joy. You stop performing for acceptance and begin creating from authenticity. That single change has the potential to reshape not only your work but also your relationship with yourself. And I believe this energetic portal exists to help unlock exactly that transformation. Finally, we arrive at Aries. And for many Aries, this moment carries an emotional significance unlike anything the other signs are experiencing. There is something important that deserves recognition before anything else. For approximately 8 years, beginning in 2018 and continuing until only a short time ago, Chiron traveled through your sign. 8 years is not a brief chapter. It represents an extended period during which your identity was repeatedly challenged, refined, questioned, and rebuilt. Throughout that passage, you were asked to examine your right to exist authentically, your willingness to assert yourself, your relationship with independence, and the cost that sometimes accompanied choosing your own path. Again and again, life invited you to confront difficult questions about who you truly were beneath expectations, achievements, and external roles. Those years demanded extraordinary emotional endurance. They required you to defend your individuality while simultaneously confronting moments when simply expressing yourself seemed to invite resistance. It is understandable if that journey left marks upon your confidence, drained your energy, or created periods when even your personal resources felt stretched beyond what seemed sustainable. None of those experiences were insignificant. Each one became part of the deeper transformation that has been preparing you for the next chapter now beginning to unfold. Now a completely different chapter begins for Aries, and this is where the energy becomes especially meaningful. Chiron has completed its long passage through your sign and has now entered your second house, the area connected with income, financial security, personal resources, and the way you define your own worth. When the exact Jupiter square arrives on July 1st, it feels less like another difficult lesson and more like a symbolic graduation. That does not mean every challenge has disappeared. Growth always continues. What has changed is the nature of the journey itself. For years, your attention was directed toward discovering who you truly were beneath old identities, expectations, and emotional wounds. That stage has served its purpose. The question standing before you now is no longer whether you deserve to exist as your authentic self. Instead, life asks something entirely different. Can everything you learned through those demanding 8 years become the foundation for something tangible? Can the wisdom earned through struggle become something that supports your future instead of simply explaining your past? Can the resilience that once protected your survival now become the force that creates lasting stability? Jupiter is moving through your 5th house, encouraging creativity, joy, confidence, and the willingness to take meaningful risks from the heart. It gently reminds you that life is not meant to be lived in constant defense. There is room again for optimism, imagination, and inspired action. At the same time, the square to Chiron naturally stirs lingering concerns surrounding money, financial consistency, and whether the security you are trying to build will truly hold. After everything you have experienced, those concerns make perfect sense. Emotional patterns do not disappear overnight simply because a transit changes signs. Yet there is one essential difference now. Deep within yourself, you have already discovered something no circumstance can take away. You have learned through direct experience that your greatest asset has never been external conditions. It has always been you. 8 years of testing proved that truth repeatedly. You survived situations that once seemed impossible, adapted to circumstances you never expected, and continued moving forward, even when confidence felt difficult to maintain. Those experiences were preparing you for this very chapter. The moment your energy shifts away from fighting against life and begins focusing on consciously building within it, your relationship with abundance changes completely. You no longer wait for permission. You no longer depend upon someone else deciding your value. Instead, you begin creating prosperity according to principles that reflect your authentic identity. Considering everything you have already overcome, you may be much closer to that reality than you currently recognize. Even if your zodiac sign is not Taurus, Leo, or Aries, this exact square still carries profound meaning because every birth chart contains Taurus somewhere. Chiron will remain in Taurus for approximately 7 to 8 years, gradually illuminating the area of life connected to that placement. Within that specific part of your chart, old material concerns, physical insecurities, and questions surrounding self-worth will slowly rise toward the surface, not to punish you, but to become available for genuine healing. The exact square with Jupiter on July 1st acts like a catalyst that accelerates the beginning of this longer process. Issues that may have remained quietly hidden beneath daily routines suddenly become impossible to ignore. Emotions that once stayed buried begin asking for your attention. At first, this can certainly feel overwhelming because anything brought into the light naturally appears more intense than something concealed in the shadows. Yet there is another way to understand what is happening. The very fact that these feelings are becoming visible suggests that healing has already begun. Pain itself is not evidence that you are failing. In many cases, it is evidence that transformation has already started moving. Instead of viewing discomfort as the obstacle, consider the possibility that it is actually the doorway leading toward a version of yourself that no longer depends upon external validation to experience security, significance, or confidence. On the other side of this process is someone who understands that worth cannot be granted or removed by circumstances, because it exists independently of achievement, appearance, or financial success. That is one of the deepest promises contained within this transit. Naturally, the next question becomes how to work with this energy in practical life. Astrological insight has the greatest value when it becomes something you can actually live, rather than simply admire from a distance. The first invitation is radical honesty. This energetic portal responds to authenticity while exposing every attempt to avoid uncomfortable truths. If you have been convincing yourself that everything is perfectly fine while quietly carrying unresolved fear, this alignment will gently remove those protective layers. If optimism has become a way to escape difficult emotions rather than face them, those patterns may become increasingly difficult to maintain. Although that process can initially feel uncomfortable, it ultimately becomes a remarkable gift because genuine healing always begins where honesty replaces denial. The second invitation is surprisingly simple, yet incredibly important. Return your attention to your physical body. Chiron's presence in Taurus emphasizes grounding above all else. Spend time moving in ways that restore rather than exhaust you. Slow your breathing. Stay hydrated. Step outside whenever possible. Feel the earth beneath your feet. Allow your nervous system opportunities to settle through consistent physical care instead of constant mental activity. These actions may appear ordinary, yet during the coming weeks they can become some of the most powerful forms of emotional stabilization available to you. Never underestimate the profound effect simple acts of presence can have upon your inner world. The third invitation is perhaps the most challenging because it asks you to move forward despite uncertainty. Not impulsively, not carelessly, but courageously. This square does not require the absence of fear before taking action. Instead, it teaches that vulnerability and progress can exist together. You can recognize your anxiety without allowing it to become your destination. You can acknowledge uncertainty while continuing to create the future calling your name. That paradox sits at the heart of this entire alignment. Faith does not erase pain. Pain does not eliminate faith. Both can occupy the same moment, and those who learn to hold both simultaneously often emerge from experiences like this profoundly changed. The symbolism of 0 degrees reminds us that both Jupiter and Chiron stand at the beginning of completely unfamiliar territory. No one possesses a perfect roadmap for this landscape because it represents an entirely new beginning. There is no previous script capable of explaining every step ahead. Yet perhaps that uncertainty is exactly what makes this moment so powerful. The strategies that once helped you survive belong to an earlier chapter of your life. They were never intended to carry you forever. A different future requires different ways of moving through the world. Although stepping onto unfamiliar ground naturally feels intimidating, it may also be the clearest indication that genuine growth has already begun. Even if your mind still questions whether you are prepared, something much deeper within you has been quietly preparing for this moment all along. Before we conclude, I simply want to thank you for sharing this time with me. I truly appreciate that you stayed through this entire exploration, because this particular alignment has felt especially meaningful to me, and my hope is that it has helped bring greater understanding to whatever you may be experiencing right now. If these insights connected with your own journey, and you would like to continue exploring astrology together in future videos, I would genuinely appreciate your support by subscribing to the channel. I would also love to hear from you in the comments. Share your zodiac sign, describe what this period has been feeling like for you, and let others know they are not navigating these changes alone. I take time to read every comment because I believe there is something deeply encouraging about witnessing people move through powerful transformations together. Until we meet again, be gentle with yourself. Trust the process unfolding before you, and I look forward to sharing the next chapter with you very soon.